Okay, this is the kinetic energy worksheet, and it is, what file number is it? It is file worksheet. It's file number 3 in the worksheet folder. So I'm going to do these problems. I think I'm going to do all 7 of them, so this video might be a little longer than I'm used to making, but let's see. I don't want to rush, but let's just see what happens. So the equation for kinetic energy, if you've already read the article, you know that it is Ke equals mv squared over 2. You're going to find people who'd rather write it like this. They'd rather write 1/2 times mv squared, or you could even put a 0.5 here instead of the 1/2. But for years and years, this has been in my brain, so this is how I write it. So let's look at this first problem. It says a 1 kilogram mass, so that's my m right here, and it has a velocity of 1 meter per second, that's my v, and we want to find the kinetic energy. So we're just going to use this equation as is. We don't have to fiddle with it at all. So our kinetic energy then is Ke equals mv squared over 2. So our mass, and I'm just putting the numbers in this box. So the mass is 1, the velocity is 1, but it gets squared, and that's over 2. So 1 times 1 squared is 1. 1 divided by 2 is 1/2. Now, you already know by this point, hopefully, that kinetic energy is measured in joules, but just as a quick little bit of proof here, we've got our 1 was kilograms, our velocity was meters per second, but that got squared. And yes, indeed, this is the abbreviation for joules. So I'm not going to bother showing you the units in these other ones where we find kinetic energy. So let's look at number 2. Number 2 is a lot like number 1. It's just as easy. Basically, for number 2, what we've got is a mass of 1, a velocity of 2, and then we've still got our 2 here. So the only difference here, really, the only difference is that we've done what to the velocity? We have doubled the velocity. So this problem, yeah, we're going to get an answer, but we're also hopefully going to get a concept. So let's solve it. 1 times 2 squared, that's 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2, and that's going to be joules again. So why did I talk about a concept? Because if you look at these two answers, how much bigger is one answer than the other? How many times does 0.5 go into 2? The answer is 4 times. So if you double the velocity, we went from a velocity of 1 to a velocity of 2, you quadruple your amount of kinetic energy. So kinetic energy, velocity is kind of a big deal. Now let's look at what happens when you change mass. So this one right here says we have a 2 kilogram mass. So this one, we're going to have a 2 here. And the velocity is 2 meters per second. That gets squared. Oops, I did a little 2 there. And so that problem is just like this problem. We left the velocity at 2, but we doubled the mass. So 2 times 2 squared, well, that's 4 times 2, that's 8, divided by 2 is 4 joules. Or you could have just canceled out these 2's and said 2 squared is 4. But anyway, how do these two answers compare? Because what we did differently with those two was we doubled the mass from 1 to 2, but we left the velocity the same. So right here, 2 to 4, that is double. So if you double the velocity, like we did here, you quadruple the energy. But if you double the mass, like we did here, you only double the energy. So yeah, mass matters, but it doesn't matter as much as velocity does. Okay, let me clear this off a little bit. So this bottom problem here, it says mystery mass. That means we're going to have to solve for m. So you guys have done the manipulated equation quiz already, so you should be able to get m by itself in this equation. So what am I going to do? I'm going to do it right here. So I've got Ke equals mv squared over 2. And the kinetic energy, let's see, I've got this divided 2. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this divided 2 by multiplying this side by 2. And that gets rid of that. And whatever you do to one side, you got to do to both. So if I want the m by itself, I've still got to get rid of this multiplied v squared right here. So to get rid of a multiplied v squared, I'm going to put that on the bottom and divide by v squared. So what I wind up with is the equation m equals 2ke over v squared. So with my numbers then, I'm going to have 2 times my kinetic energy, and that was 0.25. And then my velocity was 1. That's 1 squared. So that's kind of nice. What's 2 times 0.25? Well, let's see. That's a quarter of 2. So that's going to be 0.5, isn't it? 0.5 divided by 1 is 0.5. Now mass. Mass is kilograms. Should I prove that? I suppose I probably should prove that. I've got my kinetic energy here, and kinetic energy, remember, is kilograms meters squared per second squared. And, oh wait, divided by the velocity squared, so that was meters per second, but that was squared. So these cancel out, those cancel out. Yes, you are indeed in kilograms. Okay, so let's see here. Let's go to the next problems. Okay, how fast is something going? In other words, we need to get the V by itself. So we've got the energy right here, and we've got the mass. So we got M and J, or the KE. We need to find V. So if we've got KE equals mv squared over 2, now we're trying to get the V by itself. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to get rid of this divided 2. I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. So I wind up with 2ke equals mv squared. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this multiplied m, so I'm going to divide by m. And you might think you're done, but we don't have v by itself. Basically what we have is v squared, v times v. How do you get rid of a squared? You take the square root. So if I take the square root of this side, I just get v. And that's what I want, so that's a good thing. But if you take the square root of one side, you got to take the square root of both sides. So the equation used is v equals the square root of 2ke over m. And remember, you passed the manipulated equation quiz, so you should be able to do this. Set up with numbers, so the square root of 2 times 405 over m, and the mass was 90. So if I do this, what do I get? Let me get my calculator going here. Here it is. So I'm going to do all this stuff inside the square root thing. So 2 times 405. You like the way I said that? Square root thing. Divided by 90. And then I'm going to take the square root, and I get 3. So my velocity is 3. Now you probably know that velocity is meters per second, but I suppose I should probably prove that. The kinetic energy was up here on top, right? And that was kilograms meters squared per second squared, and that was divided by the mass, which was in kilograms. So that cancels out kilograms, and when we take the square root of these, we lose the squareds, and we wind up with just meters per second, and that is velocity. So let's see, this one right here, this one is the same as this one, and I'm at 8.5 minutes, so I'm just going to skip this one. If you want to see me do it, just come bug me at my desk. I'll be happy to help you with it. And here's one to get your mass by itself. Didn't I already do one of those? Let's go back here. Get m by itself. Yeah, I did that right down here. So I guess, yeah, forget it. I'm just going to skip this one too. If you'd like me to do either one of these, just talk to me.